welcome to a new name again, Governance and Audit Committee, held at 9:30 on Wednesday, 28th of April, 2021. First of all, agenda item number 1 is any apologies. I've received apologies from Joe Welsh. He's got work commitments. He was hoping to get here for a little bit of the meeting, but has emailed again to say he's not going to make it. Any declarations of interest? I'll bring Gary in.
Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate in any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest, is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available from committee support staff online.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Moving on then to agenda item number 3. Urgent matters. Notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant of section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972. I've not been informed of any urgent matters.
No urgent matters, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes, which are on pages 7 to 12. To receive the minutes of the Corporate Governance Committee meeting held on the 17th of March 2021. I'll just go page for page first of all, and then come back. So we have page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
there's one error in that section. Let's have a look. Minute 9, point 2. I think it should read public. If you read it, you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, thank you, Martin.
Okay, I'm not going to read it out, but I think, yes, just a slight typo there.
Thanks for that. Page 11 and page 12. Is there anything members want to bring up about those minutes? No? Do we have a proposer and a seconder? Martin proposed, Alan's second. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 5, Procuring the Wellbeing in Wales, pages 13 to 80, to consider a report by the Deputy Monitoring Officer, Legal Service Manager, providing the external report by the Future Generations Commissioner's Officers in respect to their review into procuring wellbeing in Wales. Who's leading on this? Is
Chair, I was just going to give a very brief introduction and then hand over to officers for the detail of it. It was just to set the scene, really. Following on from the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, the Commission has been carrying out a piece of work across Wales amongst the public sector as to how that work is being embedded into our procurement regime. And we took part in as one of the authorities together with Flintshire, because as you're aware, we have a shared service with Flintshire for procurement. It's really about how the four elements of well-being are embedded within procurement and procurement processes. Generally, I think it was probably a pretty good overview position, as you'll see from the report. Three themes really coming out in relation to non-Welsh government elements of the public sector, and they're probably ones that wouldn't surprise anybody. Perhaps a focus on process rather than outcomes, although it does reflect the fact that we are governed largely by external legal process, which we have to go down, and that does tend to drive what we do, how we procure well-being, and a focus on measuring how we actually can deliver that well-being impact, and then the always thorny issue of how you balance up short-term and long-term costs when we're doing procurement. Appendix 3 to your report details the particular issues relating to public bodies, obviously including ourselves, and the actions that are either being taken or that we're proposing to be taken to try and address those. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say, and I'll now hand over to the professionals to take you through the detail of the report.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Who's checking the report?
It's Lisa Jones and Tanya. Lisa's just jabbered me to say she's having difficulty getting into the meeting, but it appears to be progressing now. Her Outlook wasn't opening for her to be able to access the invite, but she says that it's hopefully working now. It just really reiterate the points that. Sorry, I was just checking on the screen. I heard a bing bong then, as if Lisa was. It was just
We're
really,
frantically flanneling now, aren't we? Yes.
it was just to reiterate the points that Julian made, really, that we were involved in the review. Clearly, the themes that are applied are national themes, but I think there are some case studies in the report which relate to work that's being undertaken by us from Flintshire, particularly in the sort of sphere of community benefits. We call them, Flintshire call it social value, which is obviously looking more at outcomes rather than just process. I think it's fair to say that procurement is a very process-driven activity. That it's highly regulated, and one of the key themes that was coming out of previous audits in respect of procurement was ensuring that as an organisation we were following proper processes, etc., and there's lots of steps being taken to put that into place. So really it was just to present the report to a committee and for us to be able to answer any questions. As I said, as Julian said, the actions that have been recognised in respect of the issues are set out in Appendix 3 from page 77 onwards. So I'm sure if members have got any questions, then see Lisa's still not been able to get in, but Tanya is here from the service as well. We'll be able to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Gary, for that. Members, have you got any questions? And maybe Tanya could answer some of them for us. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm getting a feedback. Are you getting feedback when I speak sometimes? I don't know why. I've never had that before, but it's not happening now. Just initially when I actually, sort of open up my speech. But I have a wry smile at this, because here we are again, another unelected commissioner or commissar, as I've called them in the past, on 94k a year, telling us it says Welsh Government will use a guiding hand. And that always worries me when I hear that from Welsh Government, because it basically means they're going to tell us how to do what we do. But just I just have concerns about, you know, sort of where we are going with this, especially when we talk about processes. I totally agree that outcomes are the most important thing, but to get an outcome, you have to have a sound process. And as you know, I was a previous process manager, and I used to go through the bank's processes of, you know, sort of flow map them all. And then we used to look at those processes and cut out those bits that we didn't think were adding any value to the process, or any of those bits in the process that actually didn't help us achieve the outcome. So it always again worries me when governments say, don't worry about the processes, just actually the outcomes. Well, yeah, outcomes are so important, but if the process isn't right in the first place, then, you know, we are not going to get those outcomes. And as a council, I would suggest that one of the things we should be continually doing is reviewing our processes and streamlining them so that we get to those outcomes sooner rather than later. It's just a comment. Just one other thing, what do they mean in one of the parts I read, that what are light touch regimes? What do we mean by that?
Maybe Tanya could answer that for us. Light touch regimes.
Hi. I think they expect us to.
Sorry, Tanya, you're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up badly. Can you turn your video off? Sometimes helps.
Oh. Yeah. Is that better now?
Yes, yes, that's grand, thank you.
With the light touch regime, I think because it's when we talk about community benefits and social value, it needs to be tailored for each of the contracts. So I believe it is about the approach that we do, and it's rather than, as you say, being too driven by processes. It's about a more collaborative approach. I believe that's what I refer with the light touch regime.
Yeah, check as well. Very often, in respect of where the light touch regime relates to us, is in social care contracts, issues like that. There are certain categories of contract that don't have the full weight of the procurement regulations that have to be applied to them, and that there's a more flexible approach. So there's a whole category of contracts around social care, education, health, mainly, and for us it's usually in the sort of social care sector that we would see those sorts of contracts. So the full processes that we have to apply to some of our other works contracts and things like that, they're not applicable to those light touch regime contracts. It's a specific category of exemption, effectively.
Okay, Gary, thank you for clarifying that, because obviously, you know, when we come to procurement and some of these contracts are quite large, I would be worried if we were having a light touch to those, not following, you know, legal requirements. But thanks very much for that.
Yeah, light touch, it's just a description of a different process, effectively. It's still a regulated environment. It's just not as regulated, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points came up on this. The big one for me is, how does this fit in, if at all, with something like the socioeconomic policy that we touched on last time at our previous meeting? To me, it's as if there's different elements of a jigsaw, different pieces of a jigsaw, but I haven't got the big picture, and I'm struggling to see how all this fits together, because at the end of the day, the report rightly says that procurement is a complex area, and in some ways this appears to me to be making it even more complex. And I do empathise with the people who are trying to deliver and actually satisfy all the criteria that are in apparently different directions. So if there's any advice on how it fits in with this socioeconomic duty, for example, it would be appreciated.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I think Lisa's managed to get on now. Could you answer that, Lisa?
Did you mean me or Lisa
Oh,
Jones?
sorry,
I think
Leah.
is the person. Sorry.
It looks as though
It looks as if Lisa
Lisa's still not been able to connect. Just in terms of that, Paul, the socioeconomic duty is a new duty effectively on local authorities. It's another factor that we have to have regard to when we're making decisions. So much the same as we have to have regard to equalities implications, climate change implications, we also have to have regard to socioeconomic implications. That's not specifically a requirement in respect of procurement decisions. It's across the board in the decisions that we make. So I suppose what the way it all fits in is that when we're looking at community benefits or social value, as some other authorities describe it, it is that overall picture of what are the outcomes that we can use our purchasing power to influence or to achieve. And that it's not directly related to the socioeconomic duty, but some of those projects or some of those things that we're trying to achieve, like apprenticeships or work experience, etc., they all fit in because they build into the approach that helps in respect of that other duty.
Right, I think.
I'm sorry for that. I don't think there's a specific easy answer to that question. Local authorities are subject to a myriad number of duties. They don't always knit together.
Okay. Chair, I do have a couple of other points if I can follow up.
Yes, go on, Paul.
On agenda page 60, report page 43, it talks about recommendations for public bodies, including Welsh Government. And it's right at the bottom of that page, it says, procurement needs to be at the top table. I couldn't agree more. It's a comment, I suppose, but when I was in a local authority, the definition of contracts was all expenditure except payroll. And people, members, officers, everyone needs to understand that. It's all embracing, and therefore its importance can't be overestimated. It really, really is so important. So I really endorse that. But of course, it says elsewhere in the report that it's a complex area. So you've got to have the specialists, the knowledge and the resource to actually deliver. And if that means paying for it, well, so be it. But it's not easy, but it's just so important. If I may, Chair, I also have a couple of comments on the commissioning form, if I may move to that on page 67. I found this very interesting and looked like very worthwhile, but there were a couple of, to me, apparent omissions. On page 68, there is a lot, in the middle of page 68, there is reference to timescales, and it finishes with contract start, but there's no reference to contract duration, at least at that point. And if you had, I don't know, a service contract for photocopiers for 5 years, it doesn't bring that out, say. And the other point is, on that particular aspect, we talk a lot about project management, and I just wonder how this commissioning form does or does not fit in to the council's project management arrangements. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'll bring in Gary.
Yeah, I do apologise. Lisa's voice has a lower tone today. So in respect of the top table issue, I think what I'd say to that is that it is taken very seriously here. The deputy leader of the council is the lead member responsible for it. I'm the head of service for it. I'm a member of SLT and CET. And myself as monitoring officer and Lisa as deputy monitoring officer are both involved in procurement. We have a procurement board which oversees the work of the joint procurement service with Flintshire, and membership of that board is the lead members in each of the two councils responsible for procurement, and also myself and my opposite number, who is also the monitoring officer at Flintshire, who is also the lead officer there in respect of procurement. So in terms of being at the top table, it is part of the portfolios, if you like, of senior officers and senior members. We will be reviewing the procurement strategy, and of course that will be something that we will have to consult all of the senior leaders within the authority on before we take it anywhere for approval. In respect of the commissioning form, I take the point in respect of the contract duration and the timescales. I suppose the issue in respect of this particular part of the commissioning form is that it's about getting back to process again, but the process by which we get to the beginning of a contract. We are working hard to make sure that there's a central register of contracts, and things like duration will be key parts of that register and are key parts of that register, so that when we're horizon scanning future collaborative procurement activity, we know when our contracts are due to end. We should know when Flinch's contracts are due to end. And similarly with things which are just maybe better collaborative procurement within the council, we know where various departments and services may have contracts coming to end, which may be able to be bundled up into a bigger contract if we know what we were able to manage those contracts and plan when we need to start reprocuring. So I take the point in respect to duration, but it will be captured elsewhere. That's why it's probably not in here. This is focused on getting it started. Excuse me. In terms of project management, well, clearly in any project where people need to commission something, then the project will need to complete this commissioning form, and the commissioning form, depending on value, does need to be signed off by the relevant head of service, the 151 officer and the monitoring officer.
Okay, Gary. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Any other members on this before we move on? I'll just bring Gary back. Hang on.
Okay.
I'll bring you back in a minute, Martin.
Sorry, I do apologise that Lisa's not here, but I think the point we would want to make in respect of this report is that we've done a lot of work on process. Audit colleagues have done a lot of work on process. You'll recall a low assurance report that came to the committee some time ago about the joint procurement service. A lot of work's gone into that. There's still further work to do, but we are moving to outcomes. We have set up the community benefits hub. We do have, we're having lots of conversations with Flintshire about a joint approach to how we're able to evaluate collaborative procurements to ensure that we're achieving the social value at their end and the community benefits at our end. The community benefits hub under Tanya are doing a lot of work to engage with services internal to the council to make sure that when they're looking to procure things, that they do have community benefits at the forefront. And you may be able to give you a little bit more information about some of the work that's being done. I'm aware that not everybody will want to listen to me all the time.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Tanya, do you want to come back in before we move on? I can't see Tanya. Lisa, you want to?
She's just dropped out, Chair.
Yeah, I think she has. Thanks, Julian. Lisa, you want to come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on Paul's earlier query around socio-economic duty. In the commissioning form, you'll notice a procurement checklist, and as part of that, there's one of the checklist items is around the wellbeing impact assessments. And if you recall the previous meeting, the socio-economic duty is part of that wellbeing impact assessment process now, so it should be considered as part of that, as well as other requirements on equalities and the carbon change and zero carbon. So just wanted to make that point. I just want to apologise as well. I'm having some connection issues which might be affecting other officers as well.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Okay.
Tanya, did you want to come back in before we move on?
I am really sorry, but I was thrown out of the meeting. I didn't hear anything of Gary's comment or Lisa's comments. I just went back. So unless you want me to comment specifically on something like the community benefits hub, that is possibly what I could add, is that the recommendations on the report, a number of them are being picked up by the community benefits hub. And going back to processes, the hub has a process as how we are going to deal with community benefits in the council, but also how we're going to make those community benefits tailored to the specific needs or the areas where the projects are being delivered. So that's, I think, the message that we are looking at every single contract over £25,000 at the moment, and we are ensuring and giving advice to the project managers, contract administrators, and other officers that are procuring projects at how to lay out community benefits and support them evaluating their procurement process and then monitoring throughout the life of the contract. Also, we are measuring those outcomes to be able to report to this group and other groups, and to be able to annually come and say this is what we are achieving as new benefits, as community benefits, and the impact that they are having on our communities.
Thank you, Tanya. Tony, did you have your hand up or are you just waving at me? Okay, cheers, Tony. Okay then, members, and thanks very much, Tanya. Thrown in at the deep end there, seeing Lisa couldn't get into the meeting. If we move to the recommendation, members, that the committee considers the detail within the report and the actions being taken and to be taken in order to address the recommendations. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. The Act places a duty under S22 to take all reasonable steps to follow a course of action set out in S20 recommendation and to publish a response. Members, do we have, are you happy with that? Yeah. Alan, thank you. Second, Paul. Thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item number 6, which is a budget update, medium-term financial plan and the budget process. To consider a report by the Head of Finance and Assets. Copy enclosed. It's on page 81 to 96. Updating members on the latest projections included in the medium-term financial plan and the plans for the budget process for 2022 and 23 and beyond. Julian, are you starting with this?
I am indeed, Chair. I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Afraid it's me again. Can you hear me? I'm getting feedback on my end. Can everybody hear me?
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll if you can't, just wave at me and I'll turn my camera off. So this is a report in 2 parts, really. The first element relates to the newest iteration, and this is a living document that changes almost on a weekly basis of the medium-term financial plan. The current assumptions that we have built into that for the next round of budgets. So you'll see within the documentation that we provided you with there, you'll also see the changes and decision log as they go to the budget board each month. So you can see the changes as they build up in terms of month by month, how the shortfall, should we say, is arrived at and how it goes up and down over time. And then we've also included 2 spreadsheets, which you probably be very familiar with. It's basically how the impacts of differing levels of RSG and council tax impact on our income levels. The second part of the process, and I'll ask Steve to take you through it in a little bit more detail, and given the debate we've just had on the last paper, I'm afraid is about process, is about our process for delivering the next year's budget. So the first element relates to how we will deal with different levels and categories of budget pressure between now and the end of the financial year. Then it's, as I say, one of the assumptions that we have, and you'll see in the medium-term financial plan, is that there will be a 1% service efficiency included within that. And that includes increases in fees and charges. You'll know, because it came through this committee a little while ago now, that we have an approved policy in relation to fees and charges that essentially says that we should be increasing them at least in line with inflation on an annual basis, unless there's a very good reason why not. That's a one-line summary of about a 10-page document, but that's the gist of it. The process then goes on to detail how we will be looking to try and develop a 5-year savings plan, which will be looking at a base budget service review, use of investor save funds to pump prime some schemes which will develop savings in the medium to longer term. And then there's quite a lengthy section in relation to our communications with a variety of stakeholders. The comms team came to the last board meeting, budget board meeting, and we went through a proposed process for delivering that. In terms of residents, in the initial stages, that would be more focusing on education and information dissemination. There's also the more formal elements where it'll be going to SLT cabinet on a regular basis. In terms of the wider membership, the current proposals would be that we will be holding an all-member workshop towards the end of the summer, which will go through the process, capital strategy, which is being developed, and a number of other elements. There will then be another one held in October, hopefully after the issuing of the draft settlement, always assuming the draft settlement goes back to a normal timetable this year, which is early to mid-October. And then as and when needed thereafter, if situations change. There's also communication that has to be built in with other stakeholders, like the schools budget forum in relation to schools, trade unions, businesses. And the last page of it is a draft timetable, but I would say that every other year this timetable has changed. So I wouldn't take it as graven in stone, but it's the basis that we're working on as things stand at present. And of course, in terms of communications and consultation, this committee is the one that has the oversight over our budget process. So we're here today, and normally you will ask us to come back a little bit later in the year with an update as well. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say. That was a very quick whistle-stop tour. I'll ask Steve to go into a little bit more detail on that now, please.
Yeah, okay, Steve.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that, Pawb. Yeah, this is obviously we come to the governance and audit committee every year with the budget process. Last year was obviously different in that we the process was basically sort of crammed into the autumn because of the COVID crisis. So we're trying to revert back to a lot more structured and planned approach that stretches really from when we finish the end of one financial year. We go straight into the budget process for the following financial year for 22-23, which means a lot more time for consultation, etc. The unknowns are still the same though. I'm just going to switch my camera off because I seem to be glitching a bit. And there we go. The starting points are always building blocks are three things. They're the approach to big pressures that we've got that we build up during the year, and those will change. There's what we think the revenue support grant settlement will be, and obviously what we think our council tax increase will be. So those are included in the medium-term financial plan. At the moment, we have no indication at all from Welsh Government of what the revenue support grant might be this year. And obviously there's our elections coming up, so that's not overly surprising at this stage in the year. So we'd hope to get some more intelligence on that over the summer. So for the moment, we're just assuming 0%. You might think that's quite low compared to last year and the previous year, but the long-term average is actually 0.45% settlement. So the last 2 years have been the unusual years. So, you know, we don't want to have a huge optimism bias on this until we know or get some intelligence about what we might be looking at. So I won't go really into too much detail on the medium-term financial, on the actual plan itself. The budget process, there's a couple of changes that we put in place. And the first one is this new process around trying to do some intelligence gathering about what pressures might be out there. And these aren't the big strategic pressures, because they flow through my monitoring, and I report every month to Cabinet through the finance report what those big pressures are. And you know, they're well known, and we monitor them, and a lot of work's going on to try and put some figures to that we'll include in the medium-term financial plan in detail in the autumn. This is around just sort of small pressures that perhaps services are struggling to cope with, new posts that they've had to appoint to react to various policy decisions, those sorts of things, perhaps some efficiencies in the past that haven't panned out. So we're going through that process now. I'll be issuing forms at the end of this month, so next week, to services, and they'll have May and June to sort of come back to us. So we'll have a list by the end of the summer, before the summer recess, of those pressures, and obviously they won't just be accepted, they'll be challenged, but at least we'll have a full view of what's out there and what pressures are there. The other big change is a change in tact, really, and a change in strategy, where we're trying to move away, and it is difficult, but we are trying to move away from an annual cycle of just issuing quite large savings targets. So the only way we can do that is actually to have some big projects that deliver significant savings. Those are the only two you know, options on the table, really. So we're trying to do a sort of 5-year plan. In the autumn, we're going to hold meetings with services solely around the budget, and try and identify some of those big projects to make savings. We've got a few ideas, but those will come out of those meetings in the autumn. Secondly, we're having an investor save fund. Well, it's not set up, it's already there. It's the budget mitigation reserve that's going to be used to fund this. And these are to allow services that might have some good ideas, invest in financial systems, for example, that might help with efficiencies. It could be anything, you know, the ideas need to be coming from the services, but it's to allow them funds that they can use to pump prime projects. Now, the savings might come in years 2 and 3, but you know, the funding is required this year, so we'll use cash. It's almost using cash to buy base budget savings, which is always the harder nut to crack, is finding those base budget savings. So there's going to be 3 points in the year, deadlines, because otherwise it'll be constant drip feed. So 3 points in the year where services will be asked to come forward with any proposals that they might have. And as I say, hopefully those two things will produce a plan over the next 3 to 5 years of what savings we might expect and from what sorts of projects, and we can then start populating each year where we think those savings will come from. It's likely that we will still need to ask services for savings, and, you know, going back to Gershon and all those things that, you know, services can always do things in a more efficient way, especially when we're funding their pressures, when we're funding all their inflationary increases. You know, I think there will be an expectation that services still look at themselves and look at their budgets to see where efficiencies can be made. So there will always be that element of a percentage target, I feel, going forwards. But we are trying to reduce it and get the balance a bit better. And just a final word, sorry, on communications engagement. I think we fully recognise that obviously because of COVID last year, it was all very concertinaed. We did manage to do all the consultation, you know, the bare minimum consultation, the legal requirements of the consultation, so the trade union, school budget forum, we had council workshops. But I think, you know, I fully accept that it was because it was in such a constrained period of time. You know, it wasn't ideal, but it was what it was during COVID, when meetings didn't really take place until September. So, you know, we're hoping that the communications plan that we put out, and in particular the communications with the residents and Liz Greaves' teams worked really hard on this, and it's really quite exciting. We're sort of a year behind where we wanted to be, because we did want to do that residents communication last year. That obviously couldn't happen, and I don't think it would have been appreciated if we'd have done it during COVID. So we're going back to that plan and restarting that. And, you know, I think from what that plan has got in is very much around the starting year being around increasing levels of engagement and knowledge around the budget, you know, how the council budget's set up and that sort of thing. So I'm quite excited about the communications plan. I think it'll hopefully allow people to feel more engaged in the process. And I'll stop talking there, I think, Chair, and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Over to you, members. Any questions for Steve or Julian? Tony, you had your hand up very fast there. Go on. You're still on mute, Tony. Tony, you're on mute.
Hang on. One more effort. Okay, here we go. I think we're okay now. Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. And really, I think we just hear the same year after year. And, you know, after all these years of cuts, is it reasonable to think that services can maybe cut a little bit more? And I mean, if things stay the same in Welsh Government, you know, when's this going to stop? You know, and I think that, you know, it just seems like so much pressure every year gets applied onto the same services. And I mean, I find it all very sad, really. So I guess that's just a comment more than a question. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Anybody else? Yes, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick things. Obviously, we're looking at a 5-year plan. It would be nice to think that perhaps Welsh Government could think of the same thing for us. And we've said this year after year, if we had a 3-year plan, it would at least help us manage our budgets and forecast forward. So perhaps, you know, perhaps if Welsh Government, whoever they are, after May the 6th are listening, then perhaps we can look forward to some changes there. But just on the membership workshops, that's just a quick question. Again, I know we had them last year, we had them online, but it wasn't the same as having them face-to-face in a room where we had workshops and work groups looking at, you know, different aspects of the budget. Do you think there's any chance that we may get back to that towards the end of the year? Also, with Welsh Government COVID funding, can you just confirm, have we had all the money now that we were expecting from Welsh Government to cover the COVID issues? And if we haven't, will there be any pressures in any of our business units because they've been doing other things and therefore we've got a shortfall? Thank you.
Okay, Chair, did you want? I mean, Steve can come in as and when I miss something out on that, but just to kick off, to answer the latter question first, in terms of funding from Welsh Government, we've had, there's two elements, as you're probably aware. There's one for additional costs that we incurred as a result of COVID. And then there's a second funding tranche, which is the loss of earnings because we've not been able to operate as usual. In terms of the loss of earnings, we have received all 4-quarter payments, not 100% of everything we've claimed because there are a few items that have been queried and disallowed, but by and large, we've received the vast bulk of it. I haven't got the cabinet report from yesterday in front of me, but I think it was something along the lines of £11 million that we've had from Welsh Government. And in terms of the additional costs, it's claimed in arrears, so we're sort of claiming February's now. That's outstanding, and we'll be submitting March's anytime. Again, similar sort of situation. I think we've received about £7 and a bit million from memory in relation to that. And again, a few items disallowed, which we understand and we know about, and a few that they're still querying. But again, by and large, we've received pretty much what we've asked for. So in terms of that, to be fair, Welsh Government have actually come to the plate on that, and they have paid what by and large what we've actually asked them for. In terms of member workshops, I would assume at some point later on in the year there will be some form of change to the current regulations. And I don't know when that will likely to be. Whether the June-July one might be a remote one, I don't know. Hopefully by the autumn at least we should be back to some sort of situation where we're in a normal or some different pattern of working, but I'm afraid that one's above my pay grade because that will be on national governments and what's happening with the Indian variants and the like. So we'll just have to watch this space, I'm afraid, Martin. Steve, would that be fair comments? Yeah.
Yeah, on the certainly on the Welsh Government funding, 20 million have come through for the expenditure and income grants, and that has paid for the pressures that relate to COVID. So we're in an okay position and haven't had to reduce our unearmarked reserves to pay for that. So we are in a good position going into next financial year. As far as just the finance are concerned. The other thing to note, obviously the delays last year around the RSG, there were various announcements made and hopes that perhaps there would be a comprehensive spending review, because obviously at the moment, if we ask Welsh Government, why don't you give us a 3-year settlement plan, then they turn around and say, well, we need that from the UK government, because that's where they get their money. So there was hope in the autumn for that 3-year comprehensive spending review, and unfortunately, because of COVID and everything else, that wasn't possible. So I think there is hope that perhaps the Chancellor might be inclined to revisit that 3-year strategy over the summer, and that would give Welsh Government the assurance and give us a bit more moral weight to in the argument to ask for 3-year settlements, but we never have had them. So I think we can hope, let's put it that way, Martin.
Yeah, and we do continue to lobby both ourselves and through the Welsh Local Government Association, because it's united on that everybody wants greater surety moving forward. But whilst we always get some reassuring noises, nothing as yet has materialised, but I'm sure we will continue to press for that.
Okay, thank you, Julian and Steve. Any other questions, members? No? Okay. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Steve. Moving on, what we're going to do is bring agenda item number 11 forward now. A request from Phil. So the agenda item number 11, your papers are on 169 to 190. Are you leading on this, Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the item. I'll pass over then to Lisa Hart, the Senior Auditor that carried out the follow-up. And I know Councillor Bobby Feely, Phil Gilroy, the Head of Service, and David Soley are also on the call at the meeting as well, so be able to respond from the service perspective. So if I begin, so this follow-up report of support budgets and direct payments is coming to the committee because all low assurance reports that come to the committee, there's a decision whether the committee wants a further follow-up to come back to it to know the progress made. So this is that report. The original report went to this committee in September 2019 due to COVID and the backlog of reports to committee. This is the earliest opportunity to bring it here. I'll just briefly introduce to explain the appendix to the report. There were 5 issues raised originally, 2 of them classed as major risk issues and 3 as moderate. And then it's up to the service then to propose what actions they will take to address. And in this instance, there were 28 actions from the service. So it was quite an extensive action plan. And of those 28, 22 have been completed. So we're very pleased with the progress made by the service here. But I'll pass over now to Lisa Hart just to take you through some key items from the follow-up.
Hello there. Yeah, so when we did our original review, service was in a transition period and they were all doing the process, so the audit review helped.
You're breaking up quite a bit, Lisa.
Set your video off, Lisa, see if it helps.
So just, no. I'll turn my video off.
That's better.
And hopefully that'll help the connection. So the service was in a, the service was in a transitional period at the time of our original review. So the issues that we raised in that review, obviously, and the actions that resulted fed into their review of support budgets and direct payments. So citizens can have a choice of either a support budget, which can be either provider administered or local authority managed, or they can have a direct payment where an amount of money is paid to a citizen to have direct control over their care and support, or they can have a combination of these options. So as Lisa said, there's obviously, with this follow-up review, we identified that out of the 28 original actions raised, 22 have been fully implemented. So of the remaining actions, they're mainly to do with the completion of the staff guidance on the support budgets and direct payment process and training to do with that. They had identified or got a mechanism in place for doing quality assurance reviews or case file audits, but haven't implemented that yet because of COVID. And they had rolled out as a sort of a pilot approach, really, prepayment cards, but it's still in its infancy. So obviously that needs to be further extended. But the take up at the moment with COVID with direct payments is relatively low at this stage. They had also revised their template for the integrated care and support plan, but they've just now just amended it, or they're planning to amend it to prompt them to share that care and support plan with citizens. And the other remaining action was to do with recording the CIS identifier on the PHROSES system to note that when somebody's having a direct payment. And since the final follow-up report has been issued, I've been advised that that action is now complete. So despite obviously the service dealing with other priorities, particularly as a result of COVID, we feel that significant progress has been made and therefore increase our assurance rating to medium. I'm happy to take questions, or as Lisa said, Bobby and Phil and David are on the meeting call as well.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Members, over to you. Any questions? No, very quiet. Yeah, Martin?
It's not a question really, because reality is, you know, this was looked at some time ago, and there was some quite, you know, major risks there. Looking at the report, the audit report, it looks as if we've made considerable progress in rectifying many of those issues. I think as a committee, I think what we need to do possibly is ask them to come back at some stage in the future where we've got a number that are still in progress. But on the whole, if you go through the report, you know, majority of them either closed or completed. So, you know, it looks far better than it was.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, only to say, Chair, that I agree with what Martin said. There's obviously substantial progress has been made, but the fact is that there are still 4 major risks where the actions haven't been implemented. So I suggest we need to keep an eye on them, please. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I think that is in the recommendation when we come to the recommendation. Anybody else? Members? No? Phil, do you want to say anything? I know you wanted it, you're busy man today, you wanted it being
busy man every day. No, I agree with both Martin and Paul that there are a few outstanding items that are quite high risk. You know, I'm not going to use COVID as an excuse, but we've been through a very difficult year, and we would hopefully have had them done in time, but clearly we haven't had the opportunity to do that while we've been busy shoring up some of our frontline care services. So yeah, more than happy to come back. I mean, I would ask, can we give it another 12 months on the basis that we're going to be in recovery from COVID for at least another 6 months, certainly in our frontline care services. You know, we've got issues in terms of capacity in relation to our domiciliary care in particular that we're going to need to spend a lot of time on. So I would just ask if you can give us 12 months and we can come back and hopefully provide full assurance that we're there.
Thank you, Phil.
Can I come in, Barry, just briefly?
Yeah.
It's Bobby here. Yeah, I just want to say, you know, that I'm pleased that we have made such good progress despite delays caused by COVID. But I would like to, I don't want it to sound like an excuse, but I just want to emphasize that this is a new system, if you like, or a transitional, we're in a transitional phase to a new system, or we were when the audit system, when the audit was taken. And it's quite, you know, a new way, if you like, of where people have the say and control over their own money. However vulnerable they may be, they have this choice. And so you know, it's a good system, but it is, I have to say, harder to do all the checks and balances. But I think that at the end of the day, both the citizens will be in a better position after this is all settled, and I hope all the checks and balances will be sorted certainly within the next year.
Okay, thanks for that, Bobby. Any more questions, members, before we move on? Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In view of the risks and the difficulties, should we not have an interim report, say in the next 6 months, just to report on the progress of these issues? I think 12 months is quite a long time, and if there are things that we need as a committee to support the services in developing and improving their outcomes, and I think we ought to be informed of that, and we be in a position then to perhaps implement something or recommend something else. I don't know how the other members of the committee feel about that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. What's your thought on that, Phil?
I mean, clearly, if that's what the committee want, then obviously we will do so. Yeah, and we can provide an interim report. I mean, I'm not sure in terms of what the process is from an audit point of view, whether they need to be involved in doing that. So it would come down to their capacity as much as ours, I would think. I know Lisa's got a hand up, so I presume she wants to come in on that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Phil, because I know Lisa's audit team are under pressure as well. Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. We have scheduled to do a follow-up in July 2021, which is in line with the revised dates that were provided from the service for when they expected the actions to be completed by. We originally carried out this audit because it is an area of potential high fraud risk, particularly where they're in a transitional phase and introducing a different system. I would advise that it would be worthwhile bringing a report to the committee following our follow-up in July. So that would be the September meeting, and we would coordinate that ourselves. So it's that independent assurance as well that the actions have been implemented, or at least a progress in terms of where things are up to, noting the pressures that the service are under, as Phil said.
Can I just come back on that, Chair, if I may? Unfortunately, David is on the call, but he's not able to get all of the speech, and he can't talk. I don't think we're having major system issues with Zoom. He has just messaged me to say that the guidance is all finalised, and we were just waiting for some input from IT, which we've now had. So that should absolutely be no problem at all. We should be able to comply with the July deadline and then come back in September. That should be fine.
Thanks for that, Phil and Lisa. Members happy with that? Any more questions before I go to recommendation? No. The recommendation then that the committee reviews the progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on the progress with the improvement action plan. And we've just heard that we'll be getting that in September. Okay, members, thanks very much. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you, members.
Bye, sir. See you soon.
Bye. Okay, members, going back to the original agenda now, to agenda item number 7, which is Internal Audit Charter and Strategy 21 to 22, on pages 97 to 124, to consider a report by the Chief Internal Auditor, which provides the committee with the Internal Audit Charter and Strategy for 21-22. Over to you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is an annual report.
Lisa, you keep fading away. Sometimes we can hardly hear you, and then all of a sudden you come back to us. Is your headset okay?
Hopefully so. Can you hear me now? I've just adjusted it. Yeah, is that better? Okay, so as I said, this is an annual report. So the Internal Audit Charter that I brought last year has been updated. I've highlighted in Appendix 1 the changes that have been made, but just to summarise, it is in the covering report on page 98 that where I was managing the project management team that sits within business improvement and modernisation for a temporary basis, that arrangement has now ended. That ended in March 2021. So in terms of internal audit independence, that's been reinstated, but I have put in the charter that I will not undertake any responsibility for the audits involving the project management team, and the senior auditors will continue to select the audits of projects and prepare the audits and so forth, just in case there's a perception that that I might affect the outcome of that review in any way. I've also just updated where there was any reference to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, so it now reads as Governance and Audit Committee in line with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. So that's that aspect. And then it's the internal audit, priority audit areas for 2021-22. So this is in Appendix 2. So if scroll down to Appendix 2, bear with me. So that begins on page 113. So just to give an overview on page 116 to explain how I developed the internal audit strategy and the high-level audit plan. It's very much based around the corporate priorities, corporate risk registers and service risk registers. And I also consider the outcome of previous audits, any requirements arising from the annual governance statement and the review of the corporate governance framework. I carry out discussions with all service management teams to agree the priority audit areas and to understand any key changes affecting the services that might prompt an audit. And obviously this year it's focusing on the impact of COVID-19 emergency and the impact on services, as well as the council's ambitions relating to climate change. So I've also included a brief update on the counter fraud work on page 116. But the
Lisa, you're breaking up. Can you turn your video off? See, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that any better? Can you hear me? Yeah. So, sorry.
A lot of muffling from your headset, it seems.
A bit too close now, maybe. Yeah, so internal audit will continue to have an oversight over whether there's a potential high risk of fraud, and we carry out proactive counter fraud audits, and that's included within the priority audits areas that I've referenced. And also, if there's any allegations of fraud, then I raise this with a monitoring officer and might involve an investigation from the internal audit service. So there's an allocation of days for that work, and there's also an allocation of days to respond to and coordinate the National Fraud Initiative. So we are currently overseeing the 2020-21 exercise. So the internal audit list of priority audit areas begins on page 119. So there's a table there. You'll notice some of them look familiar. I've carried forward a number from the last financial year that we were unable to complete because of impacts on our resources due to COVID, and one member of the team that was redeployed and then seconded to the Test, Trace, Protect team, who is still there, and that arrangement's been extended till September this year. So we're currently carrying a vacancy, so this list of audits has been allocated with a provisional allocation of days that will be achievable dependent on that resource continuing, as I am led to believe he will return in the end of September. So if there's any changes, we will need to keep the committee informed and that might impact in terms of some of these audits being delivered if there is any changes. Any audits that were carried forward, I've reevaluated in terms of making sure that they're still a priority area. So those that weren't haven't been carried forward, but they are still on our radar, so to speak, to make sure that if any changes, they will be reconsidered. And I reevaluate the list of priority audit areas during the year. So it's a flexible audit plan and can change given that the environment that we're working is continually changing as well. So just to reflect that. Page 112 then, we're continuing with the same performance measures. And then page 123, our public sector internal audit standards, which are mandatory. We brought the external assessment results a couple of years ago, and all actions have been completed that were raised by Gwynedd County Council, who performed our external assessments in line with the public sector internal audit standards. And I have updated our self-assessment against our compliance with the standards as well, and I'll bring the results of that to the committee in June as part of the internal audit annual report. And that's all I wanted to mention. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions, members? No, they're all nodding their heads. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Page 12 of the report, 112 on the agenda, says external assessments. It refers to one carried out in 2017-18, and there is reference to a requirement for them to be conducted at least once every 5 years. So it appears that another one is due. I was just wondering when that had been planned for, please.
Yeah, we're coordinating a peer review through the Welsh Chief Auditors Group, and I've just been informed that ours will be due in 2022-23, and it will be a South Wales Council that will be carrying out the review for us. I can't remember which authority it was, but I can provide the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions, members, before we move on? No. Well, if we go to recommendation that the committee approves the internal audit charter and the internal audit strategy 21-22. Have we got a proposer? Alan, thank you. Seconder? Tony? Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Lisa. Moving on to agenda item number 8, internal audit update, pages 125 to 142, to consider report by the Chief Internal Auditor, updating members on internal audit progress. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. So this report, a standard report that comes to the committee, provides an update on internal audit work since the last update that came to the committee in January 2021. Since then, 2 audits have been completed, none of which were given a low assurance rating, and the 3 follow-up reviews that are reported separately, separate agenda items, have also been completed, where previously low assurance award has been revised to be a medium assurance. And I've included them in the internal audit update report just because we're looking to try and report on any assurance work that we're doing on the work last year, and the need to have a wide range of assurances for the internal audit opinion. Then I can use for that purpose as well. So if you go to page page 131. So that will, there's a table there listing the audits that have been recently completed.
Lisa, if I could just cut across, sorry. Getting terrible feedback. I've just been informed that if you take your headset off and just use your laptop, that might be better.
Turn what off, sorry?
Take your headset out and just use your
Okay.
Yeah.
Having reports
Oh. Sorry, Lisa, that's worse, sorry.
It must be the laptop, Mr. Chairman. It must be Lisa's
Yeah, I think
laptop that's causing the problem.
I'll try and close a few things down on my laptop in case it's a bandwidth.
That seems to be a lot better, Lisa.
Okay. I'll try and continue. The page 131, there's a table there listing the audits that have been completed since January. So there's Real Regeneration Programme, which has given a medium assurance rating, and a review of settlement agreements. So there's a report included there. I don't propose to go through them in any detail. I just wanted to comment on the settlement agreements report, just to highlight that that COVID-19 pandemic and remotely, we did struggle to get some of the in the office together than it would normally, which it delayed the completion of that report, but we did get all the information that we needed to complete the review. Just to explain the reason for that. In terms of progress in delivering the internal audit assurance on page 135, I've just summarised there. We continue to work through and closing now the audits that were the priority areas from 20 to 21. So we're hoping to get those completed in the next few weeks so that the results can inform the annual internal audit report. We continue to progress well, working remotely, still working from home. Services continue to have good engagement, but audits are taking longer to complete. I've made an assessment based on the assurance work that we've carried out during the year, and with the work that we are due to complete shortly, I feel like I will be able to form an annual opinion on governance, risk management and internal control without any scope limitations. So just to inform committee of that. The report itself will be presented to committee in June 2021. And then pages 136 to 138, just there's a table there listing the progress with the internal audit work. And then on page 138, there's a bullet point there of the audits that we haven't been able to complete that were planned as reported previously to committee. And it just shows as well which ones are either deemed as no longer priority or those that are carried forward to 2021-22 audit plan. In terms of progress with counter-fraud work, there's quite a bit going on in terms of providing advice. I seem to be getting more queries through relating to the National Fraud Initiative. The data matches have been released now, so we're working with services to make sure that they're aware of that they are reviewing those matches and providing training where required. The strategy for the prevention and detection of fraud and a revised fraud response plan has been drafted, and that's going to the senior leadership team tomorrow before it comes here for approval. We are getting more alerts nationally as well from the NAFN, the National Anti-Fraud Network, and they relate to business rate grants and mandate fraud. So we're working with services where we're getting those alerts to make sure that we're taking relevant action. And noting as well a few more whistleblowing concerns coming through. So where there's any allegations of potential fraud, I meet with the monitoring officer to discuss any investigation that might be required for those. In terms of referrals for 2021, there were 4 allegations of fraud in total. 1 was referred to the police, and 2 were concluded with no fraud proven, but recommendations made to strengthen existing controls, and 1 more recent allegation, which is under investigation. In terms of our performance, there's a table then on page 140. And I think the key thing to raise here is the fact that the percentage of audit agreed actions that have been implemented by services is below the target, standing at 62% against the target of 75%. I think the 2 services that are showing the lowest rates of completion are community support services and highways and environment services. And just to note that these are 2 services that have been placed under considerable pressure due to their response to COVID-19, which could be an explanation for that. We continue to work with those services, and due to our resource pressures, we're prioritising the completion of follow-ups of low assurance work this instance, but reminding services of their need to address the internal audit actions. And that's all. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Lisa. Questions? No? Martin?
Hi, Lisa. I hope you can hear us, because sadly we weren't hearing much of you there, I'm afraid. There's some connection problem, I think, either with your iPad or your, well, certainly by your sounds of things, your iPad. Just a couple of quick questions. Settlement agreements, can you just clarify what those are? These aren't compromise agreements, are they? What are settlement agreements? And have we got many of these? Next one, regeneration program manager left in 2020, and we are still waiting for revised governance arrangements. That's still delayed according to the report. Are we assuming that we haven't replaced that program manager? And just wonder what was happening there. And then the third one, school fund certificates. It says there was a scam highlighted in another authority. Do we know what this was? And what impact could that have on our school funds across the county? Thank you.
Cheers, Martin. Lisa?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, settlement agreements are the same as compromise agreements, another name for them. So it's where the authority, as part of someone's exit, agrees to make a payment. Gary Williams might have a bit more information as he's involved in the process in terms of the number. It can vary, but it's not a substantial amount by any means. We carry a review periodically just to ensure that where there are payments, that they're reasonable, that they're justified, that the correct process has been applied, and that they are properly authorised, and also to see if there's any lessons learned. Why are we getting into those situations, and can there be anything that can be changed to prevent having to? It's not always possible, though, so there is there is a requirement for them.
As a committee, Lisa, as a committee, you know, I would be concerned, because we discussed this in the past at corporate governance, whether, you know, a particular department had a higher number of compromise agreements than others, because that would signal that there is some sort of issue in a department. So I just, it'd be interesting to know, you know, if we're doing a lot of these at the moment, and if we are, why and where. So perhaps not for, you know, for this is not a public issue, because compromise agreements are quite tight agreements by their nature, but it would be interesting to perhaps have some feedback perhaps at another meeting in part 2. So just to give some background to this. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to confirm, Martin, they used to be called compromise agreements. We're supposed to call them settlement agreements now. Effectively, we have a good process in place whereby they have to be signed off by the head of service, the 151 officer, and myself. So there is an approval process. HR have to be involved, legal have to be involved, and the payroll section in finance are involved to give advice in respect of tax and pension issues. The sorts of payments that are made in settlement agreements can vary, but very often they're little more than just contractual entitlements. We're just effectively tidying up that if someone is perhaps suggesting that they may have a route to take, then we get that settled out in an agreement, because what the agreement does is it settles any future employment litigation effectively. So it's not that there are large payments being made necessarily in lots of cases. It's just to ensure some sort of consistency and stability.
Okay with that, Martin? Smashing.
In terms of the other question, do you want to just...
Sorry, in
respect of numbers, sorry, Lisa, in respect of numbers, I don't have the numbers to hand, Martin, but I'm sure that we can provide members of the committee with, say, the numbers over the last couple of financial years. Is that okay with you, Lisa?
Yeah, that's fine. The real regeneration programme query, there is an interim programme manager in place since the previous one's left. Sorry, that's not clear in the update I've provided there. So the comment there is really around making sure that that's a more permanent arrangement.
Okay, Martin. Thanks, Lisa. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair.
Actually, just one, there was one other question there, which was the school fraud certificate scam highlighted by another authority. And I just wondered what that was and whether our schools are aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a potential scam that was raised by Gwynedd County Council, just flagged it up. It was something that we had been made aware of a couple of years ago and alerted all schools at that time. But there seems to be quite a too good to be true sort of offer from this company and targeting schools to say that there's a free trial period that they can sign up to. And then if the school isn't careful, that can then lead to an annual membership and the charge and the fee. So whether they want to be part of that annual membership or not, then they have to pay this fee. So we just alerted all schools to be vigilant if that they are part of a trial period, to make sure that that's formally cancelled within that trial window, so that they don't suffer any costs. So,
thank you, Lisa.
Cheers, Martin. Thanks, Lisa. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Lisa, taking account of the previous report as well in talking about resources, I'm concerned in the context of the last financial year and the impact of COVID, not just on the council, but on Lisa's team. And I'd just like some clarification over resources during 2021. Because the way I read it, and if you forgive me, Lisa, I'll go through it as I see it, is that there's yourself as Chief Internal Auditor, but part of the time you were temporarily in charge of project management. There's 3 senior auditors, one of whom was seconded, but there was then 12 months cover given from September. You're carrying a senior auditor vacancy. And then you've got one auditor working and 2 auditors, sorry, one senior auditor working and 2 auditors. Now, the question in my view is, do we still have any limitations to think about for 2021 that need to go into the annual governance statement for that year, based on the significant impact that COVID and the follow-on from it had on your team?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, you're right there in terms of the structures. Myself as the Chief Internal Auditor, where I did have line management, project management team last financial year. That's no longer the case for this financial year. That wasn't a huge resource requirement on myself. It wasn't like that was a 0.8 full-time equivalent or anything because of that. It was more of a line management role for one individual. So I don't think that has had too much of an impact in terms of my resource. Then the structure, there's 3 senior auditors and 2 auditors. You're right, one of the senior auditors was seconded in June last year, and that is continuing until at least that we're aware of September this financial year, but that obviously depends on what happens with COVID. Is a key member of that team. We then appointed a 12-month fixed term that began in January to cover that secondment. So she's in place until December, and that might be able to extend that depending on the budget, given that Bob's secondment has extended. And then there's Lisa Hart, who's on the call earlier as a senior auditor, and there's one senior auditor vacancy as well. So the decision potentially it's whether we're able to appoint that or to see what happens with Bob returning, and we have a fixed term senior auditor in place. It's a bit of a balancing act at the minute, given that it's a fairly small window. But then there's the 2 auditors, experienced auditors as well. So yeah, we are down on resource at the moment. I don't think, as I said previously, that there will need to be any scope limitations to be factored in the annual governance statement due to the amount of work that we've been able to do up to now in terms of understanding assurance, the work that we're doing with services either in an advisory capacity on the grants and also the assurance work that we've been able to complete to date. There are 3 key audits that we are hoping to conclude in the next couple of weeks, which are Denbighshire Leisure, ICT Capacity and Resilience, and an overview of corporate risks. So those are key ones I would want to be completed to provide that assurance, and we believe that we will be able to do that. So yeah, it's a difficult one in a small team. Obviously, any resource reduction has a considerable impact, and but we are adapting and have adapted very quickly to working in this way and working remotely. So we have made good progress in delivering the audits that we have been able to do. So we're hitting the...
Excuse me, Chair, I've got to take a phone call. But thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to say. So
Thanks, Lisa. I think you scared the life out of him.
I know.
Any more questions, members? No? Move on to the recommendation that the committee considers the report content, assesses internal audit's progress and performance, that the committee decides whether it needs further assurance on any of the audited areas to follow up progress with the implementing and improvement action plans.
So,
Martin?
I propose.
Yeah. Alan seconded. Thank you.
sorry, did you want the reports on settlement agreements to come back with some additional information? Is that agreed?
I think I was just going to write to members of the committee with details of the numbers.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
I think members are happy with that. Looking, yeah.
Great.
Smashing. Thanks. Moving on then to agenda item number 9, which is internal audit housing tenancy, pages 143 to 156, to receive the follow-up report by the Chief Internal Auditor, which provides members an update in the implementation of the action plan that accompanied the internal audit report on housing tenancy presented to the committee in January 2020. Well, is that you again, Lisa, to start off, and then Jeff?
Yeah, as you say, Jeff Davis is on in the meeting, as well as Lisa Hart, who oversaw the follow-up review. So just to introduce briefly, the original housing tenancy report came to this committee in January 2020 due to COVID-19, and the committee forward work programme, this is the earliest date, has been able to come back. It's come back because it was a low assurance, so the committee asked for a follow-up to come back, so the service representative is here as well to comment if required on the progress made. I'll hand over then to Lisa in terms of a brief summary of the results.
Okay, so the original review was picked up because of it was a corporate priority in the corporate plan, and it was part of our proactive counter fraud work, and we used National Fraud Initiative matches to carry out the testing. But this review identified that 15 of the 15 original actions raised, 9 have been fully implemented. So the remaining actions that are left are to do with implementing a programme of tenancy visits, but obviously that hasn't happened due to COVID. And then there's 2 actions around improvements to do with the identification process for tenancies. The one is to do with whether photos can be stored for new tenancies, and legal advice has already been taken on this, but the housing still want to explore it further. And there's 2 actions around written procedures as well to do with lodgers and for staff for dealing with tenancy fraud. And then there's just one other action to do with NFI training. Some training's already happened on NFI, but further are planned, but they were just literally waiting for the new matches to be released, which they have done obviously of January this year. So there has been some work with the NFI housing matches, but they still plan to do further training. So obviously we gave a low assurance rating in November 2019, and based on obviously the work that has been done, we have now increased our assurance rating to medium. As Lisa said, Jeff is here as well to answer any questions, as well as myself.
Thank you, Lisa. Over to you, members. Questions? Martin?
It's just a comment. Obviously, when this came up with us last, it did raise some quite serious concerns, especially about identifying who our tenants are. And I think at the time, actually, coincided with some programs on the TV across the country talking about tenant fraud. And people, getting tenancies and then subletting those properties. I think most of them, to be fair, were more, in the south, where obviously tenancies and rentals are a lot higher. than they are up here, but it did raise concerns with us at the time. One of the suggestions was, and I think some authorities are doing it, that, you know, for tenants, when they take on a tenancy, you know, a photograph is taken of the tenant and that photograph is in the file, so that if anybody goes to visit a tenant, when they knock on the door, if somebody else comes to the door, it raises a question. Are they the tenants? Or are they subletting, or have they got lodgers? So I think it's just a question of are we moving in that direction? Because I think in the report there was still some questions over whether you could have photographs of your tenants on file, and I think that's, you know, one of those that we need to be aware of. The other side of the coin too here too is this issue of you know, what cuckooing, as they call it. You know, these county line drugs groups taking over a property where there's somebody who's vulnerable, putting somebody in there, and that person then is selling drugs on. So again, it's, you know, a question of how do we check that is not happening amongst our vulnerable tenants, because we know it's happening across the country. And I think we have had county lines issues here in North Wales, and whether or not we're aware of, you know, any involvement with any of our tenants. To be fair, they won't be the criminal fraternity, they will be vulnerable people who have had these people thrust upon them. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Did you want to come back on that, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I appreciate what Martin said. Obviously, firstly, for me, I'm pleased that we're not in low assurance anymore. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Not
Yes.
very well, yes. Yeah.
Is that any better? Yeah. Can you not hear me at all? I've got.
You're coming through. You're coming through to most.
You're coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're coming through now.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
No. Oh. Any meeting. Is it any better with the headset on?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's just different with different systems. I've been in Teams all morning. It was fine. It's frustrating. I wasn't trying to avoid the low assurance discussion. I promise you. Just obviously from my point of view, I'm just pleased. You know, it's been a really useful audit for us. Obviously, we're pleased out of low assurance, but is Martin talking? I don't.
You're on
Yeah.
mute, Martin, if you're talking.
No, well, actually, I wasn't on mute on the top. There's something going wrong with the system, I think, today, because, you know, we've had all these problems with Lisa, and now we can't hear Jeff. You're coming and going, Jeff.
You still not hear me?
Yeah, now you can.
Right.
I can hear you now, but
Right.
then as soon as
I'll
you've
go
done
while
that,
the going's
you'll-
good.
Yes, okay. Thanks, Jeff.
I'll go as quickly as I can and try not to move at all and whatever. Yeah, I think we're pleased that we're not in low assurance anymore. I think, you know, one of the big keys is, like Martin said, we need to know our tenants, and we'd already decided this a number of years ago that we want to get to know our tenants a lot better. You know, from a support and a service point of view, really, to be much more preventative in the work we're doing rather than just waiting for things to go wrong in households and we have to pick up the pieces. Obviously, COVID has meant that we couldn't do the home visits. So telephoning people every week or whatever is one thing, but it's not as good as knocking on the door and seeing what's actually happening in the house. So, you know, that's a big part of this plan. And certainly, you know, doing ID checks regularly as well is something that's really important to us. You know, our housing officers have got much smaller patches of homes now. They used to have about 800 and now we've got it down to 300, and it's much more targeted. So they're feeding back that they know their tenants much better than they used to before. So we're hoping if suddenly a different face appears at the door, they would know there's something changed. I mean, and I think just one point about COVID, the risk of tenancy fraud has probably increased now because of COVID, because, you know, our housing need and applicants for housing is going through the roof. That's not a technical term. I mean, you know, basically, we're going to have to do some more conversations about this over the next few months because, you know, our waiting list for social rent housing has doubled since COVID, and we were, you know, it was quite a lengthy waiting time for people before. So that then increases the sort of the potential for fraud. If someone's leaving, someone else has said, can I have your house? You know, so we have to be very much aware of that. We're also hoping that, you know, community vigilance has probably increased a lot more over the last few months. People are much more aware of, you know, whenever we've been talking to tenants, they're much more aware of things that are happening with their neighbours and whatever. But, you know, we appreciate we can't be complacent. To get to the question, sorry, the issue of photos is a tricky one. Yeah, it's not widely used in the housing sector throughout the UK at all. You know, we've looked at a few, and that's why it's still ongoing. We haven't made a 100% commitment to do this yet. You know, we have in the past checked people's passports and driving license where they got photos on them, and people often look completely different, and we have a big debate then. I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but I look very different to my passport photo now. I know it is a reasonable enough likeness. So we are still investigating it, and yes, I think it's something we will pursue, but like locally, Clwyd Allen Housing Association tried it, for example, but didn't take it forward. They trialed it and said it probably wasn't worth it. You could get enough ID proof and whatever. So we're not discounted it, but we've not 100% committed to it either. So, but we will come back to you about that. And obviously, you know, the risk of cuckooing, where other people take over somebody else's tenancy. Often tenancy fraud is done, you know, by consent, where somebody says, look, I'm leaving, I'm happy to rent my flat to you or whatever. Cuckooing is very different, where somebody moves in and forces the tenant out. You know, we're hoping local community vigilance, you know, and our housing officers knowing their patches really well would help us with that. Local members would probably get to know, because it tends to bring a lot of antisocial behaviour as well. But, you know, obviously to satisfy audit, that's not good enough, you know, and I appreciate that. So we're doing a lot of work with our housing rent system, for example. So now if somebody's rent pattern changes, if someone's, often vulnerable people tend to be very good at paying their rent to a frequency. If that changes, you know, we get notification of it straight away. And where probably not when I've been working for the council, but when I've worked for other landlords locally and there's been issues of cuckooing, where vulnerable people have been forced out by, you know, unscrupulous gangs, the rent issue has been the one that's flagged it up very quickly, that somebody we knew would pay their rent every week without fail. That changes quite quickly, so we've been able to deal with them. So like I say, that's the whole point of doing the regular tenancy visits as well. And I think, you know, we call it regular. You know, ideally we want to visit every council home, which is a big undertaking, but once a year. But for some people, it will be much more regular that, and for some people, it might not be as often. If it just depends on the needs and the circumstances and the actions that we sort of we come to. But I do think that'll go a big way to sort of hopefully getting much better information. And I think finally, just so I know I'm going on, if you can still hear me, you know, we've had a new IT system in housing in the last couple of years. It's taken a long time to bed it in, and one of the real things that this audit's done is really help us, you know, get staff to understand the system and when they need to be updating it and what information they do. And obviously some people are quite protective about making sure there's not too much access to change things on IT systems, because you just lose control of your data. But it's important that our housing staff who are out in neighbourhoods can update things that are happening in properties, people changing. You know, there's 1 minute there can be 5 people living in a house and next minute there can be 2. You know, families just change all the time, and we just need to be able to keep up to date with that. So the fact that this audit has helped us, you know, bottom out a lot of those issues has been, you know, been a big step forward for us. Hope that answers the questions, Martin.
Thanks, Jeff. Martin, you okay? Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Cheers, Martin. Any other questions, members? Oh, Merrick, you wanted to come in? You're on mute, Merrick.
Have you got translation this morning?
Yes.
Nawn ni wneud defnydd ohono fo felly, Mr Cadeirydd. Diolch yn fawr. Jeff, sybellwch chi helpu fi. Fasa fo'n gymorth petai y cynghorwyr lleol, y ward, yn cael gwybod pe mae yna newid tenant. Y broblem dwi'n gael ar hyn o bryd, mae bobl di symud I dau, dydwch blwyddyn yn ôl, da ni'n cael gwybod dim byd, a reit sydyn, mae rhywun yn mynd o'n ac yn y blaen. Dwi'n gwybod wrach so'n anodd mewn lle mawr fel Ryw, ond wrach os o'r cynghorwyr yn barod I gymryd o. So ni'n cael rhestr, wedyn, chymod, da ni yn cadw llygad ar y statiau y tai cyngor, fel da chi'n gwybod, ynglyn â torri gwair ac yn y blaen. A dyn fasen ni'n dod i nabod y tenantiaid ac yn gwybod wedyn os oes yna newid.
I mean, just on that point, I think, you know, locally, can you hear me all right? Yeah, I can hear myself as well. I think local intelligence has always been, when we've had cases in the past where, not particularly fraud, but where somebody's moved out and they were but the latest case we had was somebody was caring for his mother, but he was really worried if anything happened to his mother in her home, that he would have nowhere to live, and he wanted to make sure he had his flat to come back. So he wasn't there for a long time. But the local intelligence we got was from the local councillor, you know, because the local residents went to the councillor rather than came straight to us. There's big issues with just sharing information, really. That's the problem. We have to be very careful these days that whenever we're sharing information with anybody, even within the council, what is the reason we're doing it for? And I think, you know, it's a bit of a challenge for us to involve members every time there's a change of tenancy, because there is, you know, we have about 400 a year, or we did have pre-COVID. It's a lot less than that, unfortunately. So it is a bit tricky, because it's what's the purpose, you know. I know what you mean, but when we're preventing fraud, then there's always a justification, but it's always been a challenge about, you know, we can't do it for one member just because it's more of a rural community and it's much a lesser occurrence than maybe somebody in real where it's happening, you know, several times a week. So yeah, I know what you're saying, but it is a bit difficult. But that's not understating the local intelligence is really important.
Yeah, well.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jeff. Any more questions before we move on, members? But Jeff, no. Thank you, Jeff. Well, going to the recommendation, members, that the committee reviews progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. So would members like a further update towards the end of the year? Yeah. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Only to say that to be consistent with what we talked about on support budgets and direct payments, yes, we should have another report.
Yeah. Okay, smashing. Lisa, would that be okay towards the end of the year?
Yeah, we've scheduled to follow up this area in October this year, so that report should be ready for committee in November. Be put on the forward work programme for them.
Great stuff. So can I have a proposer for the recommendation? Alan, seconder, is Tony. Thanks very much. Moving on then quickly to agenda item number 10, internal audit payment card industry data security standards, pages 157 to 168, to receive a follow-up report by the Chief Internal Auditor, which provides an update on progress in implementing the action plan that accompanied the internal audit reports on payment card industry data security standards. Lisa, is it you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My last report now. It's the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or PCI DSS for short. The low assurance report came to the committee in January 2020. So this is the first follow-up report that's been presented to the committee. We've identified that while there has been delays to implementing some of the agreed actions, several of the actions have been implemented. There is a consultant that's been appointed to support the council to address the implementation of the PCI DSS standards, which are quite technical, some of the requirements, but their capacity has also been impacted by COVID, which has resulted in some of the delays. So Appendix 1 shows the results of our follow-up review. So that's on page 162, and it clarifies that 3 of the 8 agreed actions have been completed. So was taken to SLT, encouraging the corporate buy-in to ensure corporate compliance with PCI DSS. And there's a cross-service task and finish group that's been set up now to set up a programme to implement all the compliance requirements that PCI DSS requires, with workshops held with a specialist PCI consultant to work towards compliance. And also there was the contract with Denbighshire Leisure. Denbighshire Leisure uses a lot of payment card systems, so ensured that there was a requirement as part of that contract with Denbighshire Leisure to ensure PCI DSS compliance. I won't go through the report in any detail, just that there is still outstanding work. We have got a follow-up proposed date for October 2021 to review the actions that are still outstanding. I think Steve Gadd's here. If there's any questions, I know Chris Jones is taking some of the lead on the task and finish group and some of the actions here, and he's based within the financial service, although there's quite a large part of work for ICT as well as part of that.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Any questions, members? No. Martin?
Just a quick question. I'm assuming, Lisa, that do we take a lot of card payments over the telephone? Is where part of this problem is, rather than through, points for card readers?
Yeah, the payments by over the telephone, there is a system in place for that, which the actual software ensures that compliance. So there is an aspect of PCI compliance within that, but the company that provides the software ensures the compliance. As long as we take the phone information properly, we don't write the card numbers down. So that's the training for the officers that are using the pay by over the phone, But the large aspect of this is around where people are using the card terminals. And, during COVID, there's an increasing use of people using contactless payments and things for that reason. So it's just ensuring that our arrangements are robust to ensure that security arrangements are in accordance with the security requirements. Yeah.
Okay, Martin. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, a lot of the car parks have now got contactless payments, haven't they?
That's right, yes. So that was one aspect in terms of ensuring that any procurement activity where there's card payments involved ensures that PCI DSS compliance is written into the contract.
Smashing. Any other question, members? No? Moving on then to the recommendation that the committee reviews progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. And as you said, Lisa, you've said the updating in October.
That's it. There's a follow-up scheduled for October. So,
thanks very much. Moving on then to agenda item 11, internal audit support, budget and direct payments, pages 169 to 190. Consider an update report, but sorry, we've already done it. We moved it to, yeah. Well, moving on then to agenda item 12, the Governance and Audit Committee Work Programme. Lisa? Oh, sorry, Alan, you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just go back to agenda item 10? I missed, things are breaking up. So have we agreed that we go to the recommendation 3.1 and that it comes back for review in later on in the year?
Yeah, Lisa said that
right.
Follow up in October, Alan.
Brilliant. I missed it. I couldn't hear what was going on. Thanks.
Cheers,
thanks,
mate.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Chair.
Then moving on then to agenda item 12, the Audit Committee's Work Programme. Pages 191 to 192.
Do you want me to just mention something that I think needs to come
Yeah,
in?
Gary's thinks something should come in front of committee.
In June. You'll be aware, members, that we took a report to council this month, which asked for permission to change the name of the committee to the Governance and Audit Committee in line with the Local Government and Election Wales Act. And it gave authority for me to update the constitution to make the necessary changes to the terms of reference. And what I said I would do is I would bring a report to this committee, just identifying what those changes to the terms of reference would need to be. Just to be clear, they're not to do with the changes being proposed around membership or chairing of the committee, because those provisions in the Act don't come into force until May of next year. But there are some provisions around the functions of the committee which do need to be updated. And I'll bring a report to committee in June setting out what those are.
Thank you, Gary. Is there anything else, Lisa, for June?
There was a request from Iolo McGregor to include a report on the annual performance review. That isn't yet due to be presented to committee, but it's almost like a dry run as part of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, which will come as a requirement for this committee to oversee.
Smashing. Members, anything you want to bring forward on the work programme?
Chair, if I could make a suggestion, I'll probably regret this, but the forward work programme for July has a RIPA report following inspection, because we weren't sure when the inspection would be completed due to COVID, etc. It's been completed now, so we could probably bring that in June if that helps. If the agenda is lighter in June, because I know we've got statement of accounts in July, and if it would free up a bit more room on the July agenda, would you rather I brought that in June?
Yes, members, July does look a lot heavier than June. Yeah. Yes, thanks, Gary. Yeah.
There is another follow-up report that isn't on there, which is the direct payments to children. If that could come in June, I'm not sure if that would make it.
Yeah. Paul, do you want to come in there? Yeah.
Yeah, but not on what Lisa was saying, because I didn't hear it.
All right. Yeah. Could you just repeat that, Lisa?
Yeah, I'll just check. I'm not on mute. The direct payments to children's follow-up report is not listed, and that's overdue to come to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee.
Smashing.
So if that could go in June.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Happy, members? Yeah. And then Paul, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, perhaps being a bit mischievous, Chair.
Get away.
No, just looking at the way that the forward work programme is laid out. It says the first item every time on standing items is issues referred by scrutiny committee. I don't think we've ever had any, and I don't know whether that's not a good sign or not a good sign. But it just struck me as a bit odd. Simply when I was looking at the paper and happened to look at that top line, it's a comment rather than a question. But because I'm not looking for a lot of extra work to come our way from scrutiny committee, we've got plenty to go on with always. But it just struck me as odd, that was all. We'd never had any, at least to my knowledge.
If I just clear up that, Chair, effectively the scrutiny committees do have authority to make recommendations to various different bits of the council. So it's a standing item when we're considering the forward work programmes for cabinet as well. It's just whether or not scrutiny wants to make a formal recommendation or ask somebody to consider something. So it's there to remind us that it can be used if it needs to be.
Okay, Paul. Steve Gadd, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair, thank you. For the June one, we need the audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management. It's an annual return that we do. It needs signing. I'll do everything and I'll bring it to, I think June probably sounds the best meeting for it to come to, because July and September will be mad and it needs to be done before we sign off the accounts. So June's probably the best meeting.
Oh, that's smashing, Steve. Okay then, members. Well, thanks very much for your time today. Thanks for our interpreter coming in for one. And I hope you have a good bank holiday at the weekend. Thanks very much for your time. Cheers, bye.
Bye.